1. The silence of Ward C9, Dighton State's forgotten experiment. In the sleepy town of Dighton, Massachusetts, the wind never truly settles. Locals say the trees whisper at night, not because of ghosts, but because something beneath the ground still listens. It was 1937 when Dighton State Hospital quietly opened a new wing, Ward C9, officially labeled a behavioral isolation unit. It was said to house the most violent patients, but those who worked there, nurses, orderlies, even janitors, called it something else, the silent ward, and for good reason. Tucked behind a separate chain-linked fence with its own generator and underground wiring, Ward C9 operated under a veil of secrecy. Inside, the smell of chemicals was permanent. The fluorescent lights never stopped flickering, and the floors always felt damp, no matter the season. Patients were subjected to what the hospital called light and sound deprivation therapy. In truth, they were kept in total darkness, exposed to low-frequency hums, and injected with experimental sedatives, allegedly designed to suppress memory retention. Strange equipment began arriving from Miskatonic University, devices that didn't resemble medical tools, but antennae, coils, and glass spheres that pulsed with static energy. Then came Dr. Edmund Harker in 1951, a man with no official biography and funding from a classified defense program. Not long after his arrival, patients stopped speaking, not just to staff but altogether. Some never blinked again. Others stood for hours in the corners of their cells, staring at something no one else could see. In February of 1953, during a brutal snowstorm, the facility suffered a sudden blackout. When orderlies arrived the next morning, every patient in Ward C9 was gone. No broken doors, no bodies, just empty beds, humming machines, and a silence that felt intentional. The hospital quietly closed the ward. Staff were relocated, documents sealed, and those who spoke out met sudden misfortunes. One nurse was found drowned in her own bathtub. Vocal cords mysteriously deteriorated. Today, Ward C9 stands sealed behind rusted chains. Teens dare each other to approach it at night. Some claim they hear muffled voices. Others swear that if you whisper "remember" near the main door, a voice answers. No, whatever happened in Ward C9 wasn't just forgotten, it was erased. 2. The Black Veil Project, Harvard's forgotten twin experiments. It began with a whisper on the Harvard campus in the autumn of 1959 that behind a locked lab door, there were two of everything. 2 files, 2 beds, 2 lives, split down the center like a mirror gone dark. Harvard's Department of Psychological Studies had long been tied to government research, but one experiment, buried beneath layers of academic respectability, came to be known only by its nickname, the Black Veil Project. The official objective? A longitudinal study on inherited mental illness using identical twins. The real goal? Something far more chilling. Can you induce madness in one sibling without affecting the other? Twins were brought in from orphanages and state institutions across New England. Records show they were told they'd receive full scholarships, housing, and care. In truth, they were separated. One twin lived a life of comfort and control. The other was placed in what the files describe as variable psychic deprivation. What does that mean? Dimmed lights, white noise, random injections of experimental psychoactive drugs, an ever-changing schedule, voices over intercoms that told them time was running out, though they didn't know for what. One surviving orderly said, "The air in the lab always smelled metallic, like wet iron. The worst was when they started talking to things that weren't there, things that knew their name." By 1963, 3 subjects had died, officially due to illness. But leaked notes suggest one twin starved herself after claiming a mirror version of herself was whispering through the wall at night. Another leapt from the upper library window, shouting that he had failed the second self. Dr. Alan Vreed, the lead researcher, vanished in 1965. His house was found empty, food rotting on the stove, mirrors smashed in every room. The project was shut down shortly after, with files either redacted or burned. Harvard never admitted it happened, but some old faculty say, if you go into the archives and ask for Project BV, they'll tell you to leave, quietly. Today, a sealed wing beneath Emerson Hall is rumored to be where the twins were kept. At night, students say they hear whispering behind the ventilation grates, 2 voices in unison, speaking just out of sync. And if you look too long into certain mirrors on campus, you'll notice one reflection isn't blinking. 3. The Groton Sleep Trials, where dreams went to die. Beneath the rolling hills of Groton, Massachusetts, where ivy wraps old stone and the night falls thick as velvet, something once stirred beneath a prestigious boys' academy, something that never truly woke up. In the early 1970s, Groton School, one of the oldest and most elite prep schools in New England, quietly collaborated with a neuroscience division from a little-known government contractor called Dormex. Their mission was cloaked in academic language, REM cycle interruption and dream state control in adolescent males. But in hushed tones, locals still call it the sleep cage. The project took place beneath the old science wing, in a cold, tiled bunker known only to a handful of staff. 10 boys, ages 14 to 16, were selected. Promised extra credits and early college recommendations, they volunteered unknowing that the tests would last for months. Each night, electrodes were placed along their scalps, chest, and fingers. Their dreams were monitored, interrupted, rewritten. The goal? To see if nightmares could be implanted intentionally, and whether fear could be used to reset behavior. It started with dreams of falling, then drowning, then being buried alive. The machines would pulse low tones into their ears during REM, inserting images, sounds. One boy, Casey Mallon, 15, was pulled from his cot convulsing, screaming about a black door that wouldn't stop opening. He never slept again. 6 months later, he was institutionalized in Dighton State Hospital, where he died during a catatonic fit. Staff began quitting. A janitor wrote in his journal, "They don't just scream, they speak in other voices while asleep." And one night they all said the same word in unison, a word I've never heard before, and hope I never hear again. The program was shut down in 1975 after 3 boys attempted to gouge their eyes out during a shared episode of sleep paralysis. Official reports list it as mass hysteria, but the tapes from the lab, if they still exist, are locked deep in a Department of Defense archive. Today, students still talk of the bunker beneath Groton. It's walled up, but janitors hear movement below, soft whispers, metallic clicks. Some even claim dreams of the black door still haunt those who live on campus, even decades later. And some say if you ever dream of that door, don't open it, not even once. 4. The Plum Island drift tests. Echoes of infection. Off the rocky shore of Connecticut, shrouded in mist and salt air, sits a lonely piece of land that was never meant to be visited. Plum Island, a place where even the wind seems too afraid to linger. In the early 1980s, rumors began surfacing of strange activity at the Plum Island Animal Disease Center, a government facility officially tasked with studying livestock illnesses. But beneath that mission, documents later revealed something far more disturbing, a classified project titled Drift Variant 41A. Its aim? To weaponize parasitic contagions through coastal drift. They started with ticks, genetically altered strains designed to carry neurological agents. These weren't meant to kill, but to alter, to confuse, to unmake. Initial testing began with livestock on the island, but quickly escalated. Researchers noticed the animals exhibiting erratic behavior, gnawing at their own limbs, staring for hours into corners. Then came the birds. One technician, now living in seclusion under a false name, described flocks of gulls smashing into windows for hours at a time. Their eyes were glazed, their feathers falling out. But worse, they were silent. By 1984, strange cases began popping up along the Connecticut coastline. A boy who suddenly lost the ability to recognize his parents. A lobsterman who gouged out his own ears, claiming he couldn't stand the chanting coming from the tide. One woman, found wandering the beach at dawn, said only this before collapsing, "They're swimming in us now." Plum Island was partially evacuated in 1986 after a leak from Lab 4 was contained. But the ferry logs show something strange. 4 unmarked trucks left the island the same night, never registered again. The center still operates, though many believe the core facility was sealed shut, flooded, or even buried. Today, swimmers near the shore speak of an odd itch after leaving the water. Some report vivid dreams, others don't wake up at all. And if you find a tick with spiral-like legs and a pale red dot at the center, don't touch it, don't burn it, just run. Because some say Drift 41A wasn't a failure, it was a test run. 5. The Ascutney Mind Beacon. Vermont's mountain of echoed thought. Mount Ascutney rises like a stone sentinel in southeastern Vermont, blanketed in mist and silence. But locals say it hums, not with wind or wildlife, but with voices long gone. Voices that were never human to begin with. In 1968, a covert joint project between the CIA's MK Ultra division and a Boston-based defense contractor was launched beneath Ascutney's northern slope. The operation was codenamed Beacon 4. Its mission? To test long-range synthetic telepathy using amplified signal fields embedded within quartz-rich bedrock. And Mount Ascutney, dense with magnetite, fault lines and deep-cored caves, was the perfect natural amplifier. They installed what looked like radar dishes into the mountain's caverns, surrounded by a lattice of copper wiring and crystal panels. The goal was deceptively simple. Project thought across distance, inject images, sounds, even commands, into an unwitting subject's dreaming mind. At first it was soldiers, then college volunteers from Dartmouth and Middlebury, then prisoners. In total, over 130 people were used across 6 years. One journal entry from a technician read, "They aren't dreaming what we send them anymore. They're dreaming something else, and it's starting to dream back." By 1973, things began to unravel. Subjects reported waking visions, mountain shifting, people speaking in reversed voices, an overwhelming sense of being broadcast. Several went mad. 2 vanished into the woods, never to be found. And then there was the incident with Dr. Craig Loam, a neurologist found dead near the summit with both ears stuffed full of moss and ash. Carved into his arm, the mountain listens, the mountain repeats. The project was buried, literally. Concrete poured into every tunnel, documents shredded, satellite maps blurred. Officially, it never happened. But hikers today still report static in their radios when near the summit. Some hear chanting through their earbuds when their phones are off. And every year on the winter solstice, a single tone echoes across the valley, low, rhythmic, and undeniable. If you sleep near Mount Ascutney and your dreams don't feel like your own, they probably aren't. 6. The vanishing town of Northfield Hollow, erased by experiment. There's a road in northern Vermont that leads nowhere. No signs, no lights, just gravel swallowed by forest. But old state maps show something strange. A town once stood there, Northfield Hollow. Founded in the early 1800s, Northfield Hollow was a thriving mill village, nestled along a river bend, with roughly 300 residents. But by 1952, it vanished. Not abandoned, not destroyed, just gone. Buildings bulldozed, records sealed, and the entire area marked restricted on post-war maps. Only rumors remain, and one heavily redacted report from a Yale-affiliated behavioral lab titled Operation Vesper. The truth, whispered in psychiatric circles, is that Northfield Hollow became a living experiment in mass memory manipulation. It began subtly. Radio broadcasts tailored to residents, changes in signage, small details, dates, slogans, town events, reworded day by day. The aim was to explore how fast you could fracture consensus reality, but it didn't stop there. Hidden loudspeakers emitted subliminal tones. Fluoridated water was laced with psychoactive agents. Postmen delivered mail, stamped with names no one recognized. Children were taught alternate local histories in school. Over time, even the residents began asking, who are we really? One surviving nurse from a nearby county hospital recalled treating a man in 1951 who cried for hours, whispering, I know I lived there, I remember the creek, but they took it. They took the idea of it. By the winter of '52, locals from nearby towns reported hearing loud humming from the valley, then seeing a sudden glow of orange light above the tree line. When investigators arrived days later, there was nothing left, no people, no debris, just smooth earth and a new chain-link fence. Today, the hollow is unmarked forest land, but hikers report vertigo, nausea, time loss, compasses spin, cameras glitch, and in rare moments of silence, some hear something far more disturbing, a choir of voices, whispering in sync, all repeating the same word, remember, 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 and then silence, because you can't visit a town that was never there, but somehow it still misses you. 7. The Marshfield Bone Lab, where the dead were reconstructed. Along the southern edge of Massachusetts, where the sea meets the marsh and fog rolls in like breath from another world, there once stood an asylum known as Ashcroft Retreat for the Broken Mind. Today there's only salt grass, but beneath it, bones. In 1932, a wing of the asylum was converted into a covert anatomy research facility under the name Marshfield Neuropathic Advancement Unit, funded in part by Harvard Medical School and the US Navy. Its goal was grotesque in its brilliance, to restore damaged minds by rebuilding the physical brain. But they lacked human volunteers until they realized the dead couldn't say no. Records show early experiments were performed on recently deceased patients. Brains were surgically altered post-mortem, stimulated with electric currents, bathed in hormone solutions, sometimes even transplanted into non-human hosts. Then came the reactivation trials, in which technicians reported involuntary movement, vocalization, and most chillingly, eye contact. A nurse's logbook from 1934 reads, Patient 12 is moving again, heart flatlined, lungs still, but he blinked when the name Catherine was said aloud. He knows something. Over time, the experiments grew bolder. One technician later described a moment when all subjects, 5 reanimated cadavers, sat up in unison, their mouths open but silent. No breath, no sound, only awareness. He resigned the next day. It ended suddenly in 1936, after a mysterious fire consumed the facility's east wing. But no fire department was called, no death toll recorded. The area was razed and seeded with marsh grass under orders from state health authorities. But a single black file was later found in a locked drawer at Harvard's Countway Library, labeled only Ashcroft 17.04, Motor Recall Protocol. Today, nothing remains. But if you walk the marshes on moonless nights, you might hear it, a wet dragging sound beneath the ground, or whispers in Latin carried on the tide. Some say dogs refuse to walk there. Others have found fragments, small skull pieces, vertebrae, jawbones, arranged in spirals. And once, in 1998, a hiker uncovered a nameplate in the reeds. It read, Patient 12, reaction confirmed. What if resurrection was never about miracles, but about obedience? 8. The Deep Vault at Cold River, Massachusetts Frozen Nerve Project. In the Berkshire Mountains, where the cold river slices through granite cliffs and ancient forest, the winters come early and leave something behind, something that shouldn't be there. In 1955, beneath a now abandoned ranger station near Cold River, a military lab was constructed under Project Frostline, a Cold War-era experiment in neurological preservation at sub-zero temperatures. The goal: discover whether the human mind could remain active during extreme cryostasis, not just survive, but think. To test it, researchers built what they called a deep vault, a refrigerated cavern equipped with EEG monitors, pressurized suspension tanks, and isolation chambers bored directly into bedrock. The subjects? Volunteers from the US Army, along with prisoners promised early release. What they weren't told was that the trials weren't temporary, they were indefinite. One declassified report mentions a man identified only as Subject R13, submerged in cryofluid, eyes wide open, brain still emitting delta waves months after cooling. A lab tech later claimed, "He didn't sleep, he just stared, his eyes fogged over, but never closed." Something went wrong in the winter of 1958. A technician initiated thaw protocol on 5 subjects, but none regained full consciousness. Instead, they screamed long, broken howls that didn't match known vocal patterns. One, upon partial revival, scribbled into frost on the tank glass, "Not cold enough, it's louder here." Shortly after, all monitors flatlined. Radiation alarms triggered. The chamber was sealed with welded steel and lined with concrete. Within days, the entire facility was mothballed. Official cause: structural instability due to groundwater seepage. Locals remember it differently. Snowmobilers reported seeing strange lights pulsing from the cliffs, and one ranger was found frostbitten, speaking gibberish, repeating the word echo over and over. The vault still exists, hidden, frozen, but some nights hikers near Cold River say the temperature drops sharply, unnaturally, just before they hear it. A distant metallic knocking from beneath the mountain, like someone or something wants out. Because if thought can survive the freeze, what else might wake up with it? 9. The Chelmsford Hallucination Field, where thought became infection. In the town of Chelmsford, Massachusetts, just beyond the gentle hum of suburbia, there once stood a square grey building, with no windows and no sign, just a steel door and a hum that never stopped. Some called it a research lab, others whispered it was a listening post. The truth is worse. In 1972, the facility was operated under a government shell company called Eidolon Technologies, claiming to study cognitive enhancement. Internally, it was known as Project Hollowtone, a classified initiative into cognitive resonance fields, testing whether hallucinations could be transmitted, not by air or water, but by shared thought. Researchers believed consciousness could become contagious under the right stimuli, certain sound frequencies, color patterns, or even synchronized eye movement. Test subjects were given visual triggers while exposed to layered sonic tones designed to mimic brainwave harmony. Over time, those hallucinations spread, even to staff who had never entered the test chamber. A chemist began seeing bugs crawling behind her eyelids. An intern tore out his fingernails, claiming he was hollowing out the transmitter. 2 subjects died from heart attacks after prolonged exposure to white void episodes, a state where they swore they could see everyone else dreaming inside them. By 1974, 4 researchers had gone missing. The lab was shut down, but when demolition crews arrived, they found the interior stripped clean, walls scorched, notes burned, data erased. In the basement, only one thing remained: a single chair, bolted to the floor, surrounded by mirrors facing inward, etched on the glass in blood or rust. It sees back. Chelmsford locals say the land was sold and paved over for a strip mall. But strange things happen there. People feel watched in the parking lot. Electronics glitch. One store employee quit after seeing dozens of herself in a security monitor, all staring back, except one. And if you stand there at sunset, when the shadows line up just right, some say you'll hear it, a tone, faint but rising. Not in your ears, in your head, because maybe thoughts don't just die, maybe they wait to spread. 10. The Stitcher of Eastham, Cape Cod's experimental surgeon. On the outer edge of Cape Cod, where the ocean gnaws at the dunes and wind howls like morning, there's a boarded-up estate near Eastham, hidden behind bramble and pine. Locals won't name it, but they all know the story: the House of the Stitcher. In 1946, the property was purchased by Dr. Alton Marrow, a war surgeon said to have revolutionary theories in tissue adaptation and cellular grafting. He returned from Europe with funding from an unnamed agency, along with trunks of preserved limbs, surgical equipment, and jars of greyish fluid. The locals only saw him at night, when the cellar lights glowed and the smell of bleach and rot drifted through the woods. Dr. Marrow believed identity didn't reside in the brain, but in the skin. That memories, trauma, even instinct could be passed through transplanted flesh. He began collecting bodies, animal at first, then human. Graves were disturbed. Car accidents yielded missing victims. What few photos remain from inside the lab show surgical tables bolted to the ground, hundreds of suture needles, and sketches of human torsos mapped with foreign limbs. A surviving assistant, committed in 1952, whispered in interviews, he thought if he could stitch enough lives together, he could become someone who couldn't die. What ended the experiments remains unclear. Some say a subject escaped, others say Dr. Meru succeeded and vanished. When police finally raided the estate in 1954, they found 13 bodies, each assembled from multiple donors. Not crude Frankenstein monstrosities, but perfect, seamless. A child's hands on a man's arms, an old woman's face on a dancer's body, all perfectly preserved, and none with eyes. In the fireplace they found pages of a journal still intact, one line underlined repeatedly, "Skin remembers, it wants to go home." The house remains sealed by the state, but urban explorers report hearing soft scratching from beneath the floorboards. One claimed to find a freshly stitched footprint in the dust, and one night in 2003, a woman went missing while jogging past the property. The only clue found, a glove at the gate, stitched from 2 different hands. Perhaps Meru never died, or perhaps he's still adding to himself. One has hidden within the woods near Exeter, Rhode Island, stands a crumbling stone chapel wrapped in ivy and silence. Locals call it Bell Chapel, not because of any steeple, but because of what the bell used to signal. Not weddings, not worship, but experiments in time itself. In 1891, Bell Chapel was leased to Providence Theological College, though it never held a single sermon. Instead, it became a testing site for temporal disassociation therapy, overseen by Dr. Roderick Ansell, a grief-obsessed priest-turned-physiologist. Dr. Ansell believed the mind could be rewound, not just emotionally, but physically. That trauma could be undone if a subject were forced to relive their final moments backward over and over until the timeline itself snapped into healing. He called it the reversal path. Subjects, primarily war widows, orphans, and the insane, were locked inside iron confessionals beneath the chapel floor. They were drugged, hypnotized, and exposed to sequences of mirrored film reels played in reverse. Screams became whispers, death scenes played backwards into laughter. Ansell's records suggest that for a moment it worked. One woman, presumed mute, began singing a lullaby that hadn't been heard since her daughter's drowning. Another claimed to see her dead brother walk away from the bullet, but the breakthrough didn't last. Soon, the subjects could no longer differentiate forward from backward. One man was found trying to reassemble his own teeth into his gums. Another refused to speak unless addressed in reverse. Visitors said the chapel smelled like wet coins and smoke. Timepieces stopped working. Mirrors fogged when no one breathed near them. And then, in 1903, all subjects vanished overnight. The building was sealed, Ansell disappeared, and the college denied all involvement. Today, Bell Chapel is a ruin, but some say if you stand beneath its arch at dusk, you'll feel suddenly homesick for a place you've never been. Others claim if you say the name Ansell 3 times, your voice will echo back not forward, but in reverse. And once, just once, a hiker was found curled up at the chapel steps, sobbing, whispering, "I watched her die backward." It was worse, because sometimes healing doesn't come from forgetting, but from not being allowed to stop remembering. The Franklin Fog Unit, where the weather was programmed to obey. In the damp lowlands near Franklin, Massachusetts, morning fog never quite burns off. It clings to the trees, curls around tires, and whispers against windows. Ask the locals why and they'll say it's always been like that. But that's not true. It started in 1959, the year the fog began listening. That year, a fenced complex went up under a forestry grant, allegedly a weather monitoring station. In reality, it was Fog 6, a secret installation developed by Bell Labs and the US Army. Its purpose, weather manipulation using microwave vapor resonance, a technique to generate, control, and direct localized fog systems for battlefield concealment. But Fog 6 went further. Their experiments began introducing tonal frequencies into the mist, using low-band transmissions designed to affect mood, perception, even memory. And then came the incident. On March 14, 1961, the fog rolled out beyond the testing zone. Not far, just a mile or two, enough to reach the town limits. By noon, 3 children were missing. By dusk, 15 residents had reported hallucinations, doors in places they didn't belong, names they didn't recognize, voices calling them to follow where the air was softer. That night, the fog pulsed. Yes, pulsed, like breath. A ham radio operator picked up a transmission on a dead frequency. A woman's voice, distorted, repeating, "You are not breathing wrong. You are breathing something else." The town was quarantined. Fog 6 was scrubbed within a week. The facility was burned, covered with soil, and the land declared unstable. Officially, the missing children were never found. Unofficially, a leaked memo from Bell Labs described them as atmospherically relocated. Today, fog in Franklin never acts normal. Some say it moves against the wind. Others swear they see silhouettes inside it, people walking where no ground should be. One man claimed his wife answered a knock on the door during a heavy fog and never came back. Her voice still calls from outside when it rolls in. And sometimes, when the mist is thickest, you hear something hidden in it. Not quite sound, not quite silence, just waiting. Because weather can change minds, and fog doesn't always drift by. Sometimes it arrives.